The USS Discovery moved slowly through the dark space near the edge of human territory. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main screen. He had been in space for 3 years, but the sight still amazed him. Today felt different, though. Today, humanity would meet another intelligent species for the first time. Captain Lisa Hayes walked over to Jake. "Are you ready for this, Morrison?" Jake nodded. "As ready as anyone can be for first contact, Captain." The communication officer looked up from her station. "Captain, we're getting a signal." "It's not human." Everyone on the bridge went quiet. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The signal came from a massive ship that appeared on their screens. It was 3 times bigger than the Discovery and looked nothing like human ships. Its surface was covered in strange patterns that seemed to move in the light. "Open a channel," Captain Hayes said. The main screen changed to show the inside of the alien ship. Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Standing before them was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with scales that shone like green metal. Her eyes were golden and seemed to look right through him. She wore what looked like military clothing, with symbols that probably showed her rank. "I am Commander Zareth of the Valerian Empire," the alien said. Her voice was deep and clear. "You are the species called humans, correct?" Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Yes, I am Captain Lisa Hayes of the human vessel Discovery. We come in peace." Zareth looked at the humans on the screen with what seemed like mild interest. "Peace. Yes, we have heard this word from your early transmissions. We have been watching your species for some time." Jake felt a chill. They had been watching humanity? For how long? "We wish to meet face to face, Captain," Hayes said. "Would it be possible for a small group from each ship to meet?" Zareth tilted her head, a gesture that seemed almost bird-like. "This can be arranged. We will use your ship. Our atmosphere would not be suitable for your kind." An hour later, Jake found himself in the main meeting room with 5 other crew members. Captain Hayes had chosen him because of his experience in diplomacy and his ability to stay calm under pressure. He had also studied alien psychology, though he had never expected to use it for real aliens. The airlock doors opened, and the Valerians entered. There were 3 of them, all tall and imposing. Zareth led the group. Up close, she was even more impressive. Her scales caught the light as she moved, and her golden eyes seemed to see everything. The other 2 Valerians stayed behind her, clearly showing she was in charge. "Your ship is smaller than we expected," Zareth said as she looked around the room. "But it is functional." Captain Hayes gestured to the table. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." The meeting began with basic information exchange. The Valerians had been spacefaring for over 2,000 years. Their empire covered dozens of star systems. They had advanced technology that made human. Science looked primitive. Jake listened carefully, taking notes and watching the aliens' body language. "Your species fascinates us," Zareth said. "You are so young, yet you have reached the stars. Most species take much longer to develop space. Travel. We're fast learners," Jake said, speaking for the first time. Zareth turned her golden eyes on him. "You are?" "Humans adapt quickly," Jake explained. "When we face problems, we find new solutions. Sometimes we find solutions nobody else has thought of." One of the other Valerians, a male with darker scales, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Adapt? You mean you stumble around until something works?" Jake felt his face get warm, but he kept his voice calm. "Sometimes the best solutions come from trying new things. We don't always follow the rules that others have made." Zareth looked interested. "Give me an example." Jake thought for a moment. "Our ship's engine design. Most species we've studied use fusion reactors that follow standard patterns. We combined fusion with antimatter in a way that's not supposed to work according to known physics. But it does work, and it gives us more speed and efficiency. Impossible, the dark-scaled Valerian said. Antimatter cannot be safely combined with fusion in that manner. Yet here we are, Jake said with a small smile, flying on an engine that shouldn't work. Zara studied Jake more carefully. There was something in her expression that he couldn't read. Interesting. Perhaps there is more to your species than first appears. The meeting continued for several hours. They discussed trade, technology, and the dangers of space. The Valerians told them about a terrible enemy called the Devourers. These creatures consumed entire star systems, turning everything into food for their endless hunger. The Devourers have destroyed 16 worlds in the past year, Zareth said. They are moving toward this sector of space. Your species will face them eventually. Captain Hayes looked worried. What can we do against such creatures? Alone? Nothing, Zareth said bluntly. But together, our combined fleets might have a chance. This is why we have come to meet you. As the meeting ended, the Valerians prepared to return to their ship. The dark-scaled male said something to Zareth in their own language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone seemed mocking. Zareth responded sharply, also in Valerian. Then she looked at the humans. Culrin suggests that our species might become close allies. Perhaps even? She paused, and her scales seemed to change color slightly. Personal relationships might develop between our kinds. Kelrin made that laughing sound again and said something else in Valerian. Zareth's expression became cold. He asks if I would consider mating with a human. She looked directly at Jake, and her golden eyes seemed to flash with amusement. The idea is quite ridiculous, of course. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of metal. Humans are mammals. Primitive creatures driven by emotion rather than logic. The thought of physical intimacy with such a being is absurd. We Valerians have evolved far beyond such base needs. Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger. He wanted to say something, but Captain Hayes put a hand on his arm to stop him. Our species are very different, Captain Hayes said diplomatically. But perhaps we can learn from each other. Perhaps, Zareth said, though her tone suggested. She doubted it. We will consider your proposal for an alliance against the Devourers. You will have our answer soon. The Valerians left without another word. Jake watched Zareth go, feeling a strange mix of anger and fascination. She was beautiful in an alien way, but her arrogance was clear. The way she had laughed at the idea of any relationship between their species stung more than he wanted to. Admit, don't take it personally, Jake, Captain Hayes said after the aliens were gone. They're just very different from us. I know, Jake said. But did you see how she looked at us? Like we were animals in a zoo. Give it time, the captain said. First contact is always awkward. Maybe they'll see that we're more than they think. Jake nodded, but he couldn't forget the sound of Zareth's laughter or the way her golden eyes had looked at him when she called the idea of mating with a human ridiculous. Something told him that this was just the beginning of a very complicated relationship between their species. 2 days later, the Valerians sent their answer. They would agree to a limited alliance against the Devourers. There would be joint training, missions, and shared intelligence. Jake found himself assigned to the liaison team that would work directly with the Valerians. He wondered if he would see Commander Zareth again, and if he did, whether she would still think humans were just primitive. Mammals not worth her consideration. 3 weeks after the first meeting, Jake found himself aboard a joint mission ship heading toward the outer rim of human space. The alliance between humans and Valerians was still new and fragile. This mission would test how well the two species could work together. The ship carried 20 humans and 15 Valerians. Jake served as the human tactical officer, while Commander Zareth led the Valerian military contingent. They had barely spoken since that first meeting, though Jake often caught her watching him during briefings. "The Devourer scouts have been spotted in this system," Captain Hayes explained to the mixed crew. "Our job is to gather intelligence and report back. We are not to engage unless absolutely necessary." Zareth H. stepped forward. "The Devourers are not like any enemy you have faced before. They do not think as we do. They exist only to consume and grow stronger." Jake studied the star charts on the main screen. Something bothered him about the mission plan. "Captain, the approach vector seems wrong. If we come in from this angle, we'll be visible to their sensors for too long." "The plan has been approved by both command structures," Zareth said coldly. "Perhaps human officers should trust in superior Valerian strategic planning." "Superior planning that might get us all killed," Jake replied, his patience finally wearing thin. The bridge went quiet. Several Valerians hissed softly, which Jake had learned was a sign of anger or displeasure. Captain Hayes held up her hand. "Morrison, explain your concerns." Jake moved to the display controls. "Look at this. The Devourers always position their scout ships in a defensive triangle. If we approach from the planned route, we'll trigger sensors from at least 2 of their ships. But if we come in through this asteroid field, we can get close to just 1 ship and gather the data we need." Zareth examined the alternative route Jake had plotted. Her golden eyes moved quickly across the display. "The asteroid field is dangerous. 1 collision could destroy us. I can pilot us through it," Jake said. "I've done asteroid navigation before." "You have flown through asteroid fields controlled by primitive pirates," Zareth said dismissively. "This field has rocks moving at tremendous speeds. The gravitational forces are complex." "Then help me," Jake said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Your sensors are better than ours. Your computers can calculate the gravitational effects. Together, we might actually have a chance." Zareth stared at him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded slightly. "Very well. We will attempt your plan." The next few hours were tense as Jake and Zareth worked together to navigate the treacherous asteroid field. Jake piloted the ship with careful precision, while Zareth called out warnings about incoming rocks and gravitational shifts. Despite their differences, they found a rhythm that worked. "Large asteroid approaching from starboard," Zareth announced. "Impact in 30 seconds." Jake spun the ship in a tight spiral, using the gravitational pull of a nearby rock to slingshot them past the danger. "How's that for primitive mammal flying?" To his surprise, Zareth made a sound that might have been approval. "Adequate." They successfully reached the edge of the system without being detected. The Devourer scout ship hung in space like a massive black tumor. It was unlike any ship Jake had ever seen. Instead of clean lines and proper design, it looked grown rather than built. "Beginning sensor sweeps," the science officer reported, "getting some interesting readings." That's when everything went wrong. "Captain," the communications officer shouted. "Multiple contacts approaching fast. It's a Devourer battle group." The main screen lit up with enemy ships. Not just scouts, but massive warships that dwarfed even the largest human vessels. They had walked into a trap. "All hands, battle stations." Captain Hayes ordered, "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." "Jump drive is offline," the engineer reported. "Something's jamming our systems." Zareth moved quickly to her station. "The Devourers use inhibitor fields. No ship can jump while inside their range." The first enemy weapons struck their shields. The ship shook violently, and lights flickered throughout the bridge. "Shields down to 60%, Jake reported from his station. "We can't take much. More of this." "There," Zareth pointed to a spot on the tactical display. "A planet in this system." If we can reach it, the Devourers might not follow. They prefer space combat. Captain Hayes nodded. Do it. Jake pushed the engines to maximum power, dodging enemy fire as they raced toward the planet. Behind them, the Devourer ships followed like hungry predators. More weapons fire struck their hull. Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported. Emergency force fields are holding. The planet grew larger on the screen. It looked hostile. All red rock and violent storms. But it was their only chance. Prepare for emergency landing, Captain Hayes ordered. All hands brace for impact. Jake had never landed a ship this size on a planet before. The atmosphere was thin and filled with electrical storms that interfered with their sensors. He had to rely on instinct and luck as much as skill. The ship hit the ground hard, bouncing twice before sliding to a stop in a cloud of dust and debris. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. Damage report, Captain Hayes called out. The news was bad. The ship was broken beyond repair. Life support was working, but wouldn't last long. 23 crew members were injured, and 5 were dead. Jake looked at the external cameras. The Devourer ships circled overhead like vultures, but didn't land. Zareth had been right. They preferred space combat. We need to find shelter and a way to signal for rescue, Captain Hayes said. Morrison, take a team and scout the area. I will accompany him, Zareth announced. Several people looked surprised, including Jake. Commander, you don't need to. I know this type of planet, Zareth interrupted. My knowledge may prove useful. The scouting team consisted of Jake, Zareth, 2 other humans, and 1 Valerian named Kess. They left the crashed ship and walked into the alien landscape. The planet was harsh and unforgiving. The air was thin but breathable. Strange rock formations jutted up from the ground like broken teeth. In the distance, electrical storms flashed constantly across the sky. There, Zareth pointed toward a series of caves in a cliff face. Natural shelter. We should investigate. As they walked, Jake found himself studying his alien companion. She moved with fluid grace, despite the rough terrain. Her scales seemed to change color slightly in the strange light of this world. Why? Did you volunteer to come with me? Jake asked. Zareth didn't look at him. You may be primitive, but your unconventional thinking proved useful in the asteroid field. Perhaps it will be useful here as well. That was probably the closest thing to a compliment he would get from her. They reached the caves as the planet's sun began to set. The temperature dropped quickly, and wind howled through the rock formations. The caves provided good shelter, but they would need heat and food soon. I'll gather material for a fire, Jake said. Fire will not work in this atmosphere, Zareth replied. The gas mixture is wrong. Jake looked around the cave and spotted some crystalline formations on the walls. He remembered something from his geology training. What about those crystals? They might generate heat if we can create an electrical charge. Zareth examined the crystals with her scanner. Possible. But how do you plan to generate electricity? Jake smiled and pulled out his emergency kit. Inside was a small hand-cranked generator meant for charging equipment. Primitive human technology to the rescue. Working together, they managed to rig up a heating system using the crystals and Jake's generator. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Soon the cave was warm enough to be comfortable. That night, as they took turns keeping watch, Jake and Zareth talked more than they ever had before. She told him about Valerian military traditions and the pressure she faced as a female commander. In a male-dominated hierarchy, he shared stories about growing up on Earth and his dreams of exploring the galaxy. Your species is strange, Zareth said as they watched the electrical storms light up the sky. You adapt so quickly to new situations. Most species follow established patterns. You create new ones. Is that good or bad? Jake asked. Zarat H. was quiet for a long moment. I am beginning to think it may be good. Very good. For the first time since they'd met, Jake saw something other than cold superiority in her. Golden eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for understanding between their species after all. For 6 days, the survivors waited in the caves while Jake and Zarath led daily scouting missions. The planet seemed determined to kill them. Acid rain fell without warning. Strange creatures hunted in packs during the night. The thin air made everyone tired and weak. On the 7th day, disaster struck again. Jake was exploring a deep section of the cave system when he heard a rumbling sound. The ground shook and dust fell from the ceiling. He realized what was happening just in time. Cave in, he shouted, running toward the entrance. The tunnel collapsed behind him as he dove forward. Rocks crashed down, blocking his path back to the others. In the darkness, he heard Zarath calling his name from the other side of the rock fall. Jake, can you hear me? I'm alive, he called back, but I'm trapped. We will dig you out, Zarath's voice came through the rocks. Stay calm. But Jake could see that more rocks were shifting above him. The whole tunnel system was unstable. If the others tried to dig through, they might cause another collapse that could kill everyone. No, he shouted. Don't dig. The ceiling is too weak. You'll bring down the whole cave. There must be another way, Zarath said. He could hear the worry in her voice, which surprised him. Jake turned on his emergency light and looked around. The tunnel continued deeper into the mountain. Maybe there was another way out. I'm going to look for another exit, he called to Zarath. If I don't find one in 2 hours, then you can try digging. That is too dangerous, Zarath replied. You do not know what is down there. It's our best chance, Jake said. Take care of the others. He didn't wait for her response. Moving carefully through the narrow tunnel, Jake squeezed between fallen rocks and crawled through tight spaces. His light cast strange shadows on the cave walls. After an hour of difficult travel, he found what he was looking for. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber with another exit leading up toward the surface. But the chamber wasn't empty. 3 alien creatures stood between him and the exit. They looked like giant insects with sharp claws and multiple eyes. They had been feeding on something when Jake's light disturbed them. The creatures turned toward him and made angry clicking sounds. Jake slowly reached for his weapon, but he knew he couldn't fight 3 of them in the narrow space. Then he remembered something Zarath had told him about local wildlife. Many alien species were territorial, but not aggressive unless threatened. Maybe he could scare them away instead of fighting them. Jake made himself as large as possible and shouted at the top of his lungs. The sound echoed through the chamber. The creatures stepped back, surprised by the noise. Jake shouted again and banged his weapon against the rock wall. The creatures decided he was too much trouble. They chittered angrily and scuttled away through cracks in the walls. Jake climbed toward the surface exit, his heart pounding. The tunnel led up through the mountain and finally opened onto a ledge high above the main cave entrance. He could see the camp below where the other survivors waited. Zarath? He called down. She looked up and saw him on the ledge. Even from a distance, he could see her relief. How did you get up there? She called back. Long story. I'm coming down. The climb down the cliff face was dangerous. The rock was loose and crumbly. Halfway down, Jake's hand slipped, and he fell the last 20 feet, landing hard on his left arm. Zarath reached him first. Are you injured? Jake tried to move his arm and winced. I think it's broken. Without hesitation, Zarath helped him to his feet and supported his weight as they walked back to the cave. Her touch was gentle, which surprised him. He had expected her skin to feel cold and rough, but it was warm and smooth. You were foolish to take such risks, she said as she examined his arm in the cave's dim light. It worked, didn't it? Jake replied, trying not to show how much his arm hurt. Yes, Zareth admitted. It worked. She set his broken bone with skill and made a splint from materials in their emergency supplies. Her hands were steady and careful as she worked. Where did you learn medical treatment? Jake asked. All Valerian officers receive medical training, she replied. We often serve on ships far from proper medical facilities. As she finished wrapping his arm, their faces were close together. Jake found himself looking into her golden eyes. For a moment, he forgot that she was an alien from a species that thought humans were primitive. Thank you, he said quietly. Zareth stared at him for a long moment. Something passed between them that neither quite understood. Then she pulled away and stood up quickly. Rest, she said in her usual commanding voice. Your arm needs time to heal. That night, Jake lay awake, thinking about the moment they had shared. He was attracted to Zareth, which seemed impossible. She was beautiful in an exotic way, but more than that, he admired her intelligence and strength, the way she had cared. For his injury had shown him a gentler side of her personality, but she had made it clear what she thought about relationships between their species. She had laughed at the very idea. The next morning brought bad news. Their food supplies were running low, and there was still no sign of rescue. Someone would have to venture further from the caves to look for edible plants or animals. I'll go. Jake volunteered. Your arm is broken, Zareth pointed out. You cannot properly defend yourself. Then come with me, Jake said. Your sensors can identify safe food sources. Zareth considered this. Very well, but we stay together at all times. They left the caves early and walked across the rocky landscape. The planet's strange plants grew in twisted shapes, and most of them were poisonous according to Zareth's scanner. After several hours of searching, they found a grove of fruit trees that seemed safe. These will provide nutrition for several days, Zareth said. Scanning the purple fruit's dot as they gathered food, Jake noticed storm clouds building on the horizon. We need to find shelter. That looks like a bad storm. They took cover in a shallow cave just as the storm hit. Acid rain poured down outside, and lightning struck the ground nearby. The air filled with the smell of burned rock. It will pass soon, Zareth said, but her voice sounded uncertain. The storm was worse than either of them expected. It lasted for hours, trapping them in the small cave. They sat close together for warmth as the temperature dropped. Tell me about your family, Jake said, trying to distract them both from the cold and the frightening sounds outside. Zareth was quiet for a while. My parents wanted me to become a scientist or a diplomat. Military service was not considered appropriate for females in my family's social class. But you chose it anyway. Yes, I wanted to prove that females could be as strong as males, that we could lead and fight just as well. She looked at him. What about your family? My parents died when I was young, Jake said. I grew up in foster homes. The military gave me a purpose and a family of sorts. So we are both rebels in our own ways, Zareth observed. I guess we are. They talked through the long hours of the storm. Jake learned that Zareth wrote poetry in her spare time, though she had never shared it with anyone. She discovered that Jake had studied alien cultures because he dreamed of making peaceful contact with other species. I never expected to actually meet aliens, Jake admitted. And I certainly never expected to be stranded on a hostile planet with one. Are you disappointed? Zareth asked. Jake looked at her in the dim light of their emergency beacon. No. Despite everything that's happened, I'm glad I met you. Zareth's scales seemed to shift color slightly. That is ... unexpected. Why? Because I feel the same. Way, she said quietly. The storm finally passed near dawn. As they prepared to leave the cave, Zareth stumbled on the uneven ground. Jake caught her with his good arm, pulling her against him to keep her from falling. They stood there for a moment, very close together. Jake could feel her breathing and see his reflection in her golden eyes. The attraction he had been fighting was too strong to ignore. "This is not wise," Zareth whispered. "Probably not," Jake agreed. But he didn't let go of her dot slowly. Carefully, he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were softer than he had expected, and she tasted like nothing he had ever experienced before. After a moment of surprise, she kissed him back. When they finally separated, both of them looked shocked by what had happened. "We should return to the others," Zareth said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Jake agreed, though he made no move to leave. They kissed again, longer this time. Jake felt as if he was falling into something deep and dangerous, but he didn't care. Nothing had ever felt more right than holding Zareth in his arms. Finally, they forced themselves apart and walked back toward the caves in silence. Both of them knew that everything had changed between them, but neither was ready to talk about what it meant. The rescue ships arrived 3 days later. The rescue ships arrived like saviors from heaven. Jake watched the human vessel Discovery and the Valerian cruiser Starward drop through the planet's atmosphere. After 2 weeks of struggling to survive, the sight of friendly ships brought tears to his eyes. But as the rescue teams landed, Jake felt his heart sink. He and Zareth would be separated now. They would return to their own people, their own duties. What had happened between them on this hostile world would become just a memory. During the evacuation, they barely had time to speak. Both of them were needed to help coordinate the rescue of injured crew members. Jake watched Zareth work with her usual efficiency, giving orders and checking on her people. She seemed to have returned to being the cold, professional commander he had first met. Only once did their eyes meet across the landing zone. For just a moment, Jake saw something soft in her golden gaze. Then she looked away and continued her duties. The medical teams separated the wounded by species. Jake found himself aboard the Discovery being treated for his broken arm and various cuts and bruises. Zareth was taken to the Valerian ship for her own medical examination. "How are you feeling, Morrison?" Captain Hayes asked when she visited him in the medical bay. "Fine, Captain. Ready to get back to duty." Captain Hayes studied his face. "The Valerians have filed very positive reports about your performance during the crisis. Commander Zareth specifically mentioned your tactical thinking and leadership." Jake felt a flutter of hope. "Did she say anything else?" "She recommended you for commendation." High praise from a Valerian commander. Captain Hayes paused. "You two seem to work well together." "Yes, we did," Jake said carefully. After the medical checks were complete, both ships prepared to leave the system. Jake stood at an observation window and watched the Valerian cruiser move away. Somewhere on that ship, Zareth was probably preparing reports and getting back to her normal life. The next 3 months passed slowly. Jake threw himself into his work, but he couldn't stop thinking about those final days on the planet. He remembered every conversation, every touch, every moment of their time together. Most of all, he remembered the kiss they had shared and the way Zareth had looked at him afterward. He heard nothing from her. The alliance between humans and Valerians continued to develop, but the two species kept their distance, except for official business. Jake began to think that what had happened between them meant nothing to her. Maybe it had just been the stress of survival making them both act strangely. And everything changed. Jake was working late in his quarters when his communication system chimed with an urgent message. The sender was listed as anonymous, but when he opened it, he recognized Zareth's voice immediately. "Jake, I need to speak with you privately. Meet me at the neutral station at coordinates I am sending. Come alone, tell no one." This is extremely important. The message included location data for a small trading station in neutral space between human and Valerian territory. Jake stared at the screen for a long time. Why would Zarath want to meet him in secret? And why did she sound so worried? 2 days later, Jake used his leave time to travel to the trading station. It was a rough place where smugglers and merchants from dozens of species conducted business. The perfect place for a secret meeting. He found Zarath waiting in a private booth at the back of a noisy cantina. She wore civilian clothes instead of her military uniform, and she looked tired. Her scales seemed duller than he remembered, and there were dark circles under her golden eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said as he sat down across from her. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "You sounded scared in your message." Zarath looked around the cantina to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned forward and spoke in a low voice. "I am pregnant." Jake felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. "What?" "I am carrying a child. Your child." "But that's impossible," Jake said. "Your scientists said our species couldn't reproduce together. The biology is too different." "Apparently the scientists were wrong," Zarath replied bitterly. "Very wrong." Jake's mind raced. A baby. Their baby. The idea was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. "How long have you known?" he asked. 2 weeks. I had the tests run 3 times to be certain. Zarath's voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. "No one else knows yet, but I cannot hide it much longer." "What will happen when people find out?" Zarath's expression grew dark. "Nothing good. My government considers this a contamination of our bloodline. My family has already started asking questions about my health and behavior. If they discover the truth—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Jake understood. The Valerians took genetic purity very seriously. A hybrid child would be seen as an abomination. "What about your career?" Jake asked. "Over. Finished. I will be. Stripped of rank and probably exiled." Zarath touched her stomach gently. "Some of the hardliners are already calling for any human Valerian hybrids to be eliminated before birth." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "They want to kill our baby? They want to prevent what they see as genetic pollution of our species." Zarath looked directly at him. "That is why I called you here. You needed to know, but also I need to decide what to do." "What do you mean?" "I could end the pregnancy. It would be simple, and no one would ever know what happened." Zarath's voice was barely a whisper. "It might be the wisest choice." "No," Jake said firmly. "Absolutely not. You do not understand the consequences." "I understand perfectly," Jake interrupted. "This baby is part of both of us. It's proof that our species can work together, can create something new and amazing. We can't destroy that." Zarath stared at him. "You want the child?" "Of course I do, don't you?" For the first time since he had arrived, Zarath's expression softened. "Yes, more than I thought possible. But wanting something and being able to have it are different things." "Then we'll find a way," Jake said. "We'll make it work." "How?" "I cannot return to Valerian space while pregnant." "You cannot abandon your career to help me. Where would we go? What would we do?" Jake reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin was warm and smooth, just as he remembered. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "The same way we survived on that planet. Step by step, problem by problem." Zarath squeezed his hand. "The pregnancy is not normal. The medical scans show that the child is developing differently than either human or Valerian babies. We don't know if it will survive or what problems it might have. Then we'll find doctors who can help. Scientists who are interested in studying this instead of destroying it. Such people exist. They have to. There are progressive voices in both our governments. People who believe our alliance should be more than just military cooperation. Over the next hour, they talked through their options. None of them were easy. Zarat H. would have to resign her commission and disappear from Valerian society. Jake would need to find a way to help her without destroying his own career. There are frontier colonies where questions aren't asked, Jake suggested. Places where a Valerian woman and a human man might be able to live quietly. With a hybrid child that belongs to neither species, Zareth added. Our child will belong to both species. It will be the first of its kind, something completely new in the galaxy. Zareth smiled for the first time since he had arrived. You sound like you're looking forward to this. I am, Jake realized. Scared out of my mind, but looking forward to it. What about you? Terrified, Zareth admitted, but also excited. This child will be unique. Neither fully human nor fully Valerian, but perhaps something better than either. When will you have to leave your ship? Soon. My condition will become obvious within a few weeks. I have already submitted a request for extended leave due to a family emergency. I'll submit for a transfer to frontier patrol duty. That will put me in the outer systems where we can meet again. And then? Then we disappear. Find a place where we can raise our child safely. Jake paused. Are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back to our old lives. Zareth was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and moved around the table to sit beside him. She took his face in her hands and kissed him gently. My old life never included anything as important as this, she said. Yes, I am sure. As they prepared to leave the station separately, Zareth gave him coordinates for another meeting point. 2 weeks, she said. By then, I will have left my ship. We can start planning our new life. Jake watched her walk away, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. In 2 weeks, everything would change. They would be fugitives from their own people, carrying a child that represented either the future of human-Valerian relations or a dangerous mistake that both species would want to forget. Either way, Jake knew he had never been more certain of anything in his life. He loved Zareth, and he would do whatever it took to protect her and their unborn child. Jake's hands shook as he read the emergency message on his personal communicator. The words made his blood run cold. Zareth H. taken by Valerian security forces. Forced medical procedure scheduled. Help me. Kes had been the other Valerian. Survivor from their crashed ship. He was one of the few who had seen how Jake and Zareth worked together. Apparently, he was also one of the few who cared enough to send a warning. Jake stared out the window of his quarters aboard the patrol ship USS Ranger. They were 3 days out from the frontier colony where he and Zareth had planned to meet. 3 days too late. He grabbed his emergency kit and headed for the shuttle bay. Captain Morris stopped him in the corridor. Where are you going, Morrison? We're not scheduled to dock for 2 days. Family emergency, sir. I need to take a shuttle to the nearest starbase. Captain Morris frowned. What kind of family emergency? Jake had prepared for this question, but the lie still felt bitter in his mouth. My sister is dying. I need to get to her before it's too late. I'm sorry to hear that. Take Shuttle Bay too. But Morrison? Captain Morris put a hand on his shoulder. Be careful out there. Intelligence reports suggest Valerian military activity has increased in this sector. Jake nodded and continued toward the shuttle bay. Captain Morris had no idea how right he was about the Valerian military activity. The shuttle trip to Starbase, Echo, took 18 hours. Jake used the time to plan. He couldn't just walk into Valerian space and demand they release Zareth. He needed help, and he needed it from someone with influence. At the starbase, Jake sent coded messages to 3 people. The first was to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a xenobiologist who who had been studying human Valerian genetics. The second was to Admiral Patricia Stone, a progressive voice in human military command. The third was to someone he had never expected to contact, Caleron the Valerian. Officer who had joked about interspecies relationships during their first meeting, Dr. Rodriguez responded first. She agreed to meet him at a medical facility on the neutral world of Haven Station. Admiral Stone's message was more cautious, but she promised to look into the situation through diplomatic channels. Caleron's response surprised Jake the most. "Meet me at the old trading post on Zerian Prime. Come alone. Time is running short." Zerian Prime was a barely habitable world on the edge of Valerian space. Jake hired a smuggler to take him there, paying with credits he had saved over 5 years of military service. He found Caleron waiting in the ruins of an abandoned mining station. The Valerian officer looked older and more tired than Jake remembered. "You came," Caleron said. "I was not certain you would." "Where is she?" Jake demanded. "Being held at a medical facility on Valeris Prime. They plan to terminate the pregnancy tomorrow and then conduct experiments on the fetal tissue." Jake felt sick. Experiments? Some of our scientists are fascinated by the genetic combination. They want to understand how it was possible. Caleron's expression was disgusted. Others simply want to prove that such hybrids are not viable. "Why are you helping me?" Caleron was quiet for a moment. "Because I have seen the reports from your crashed ship mission. I know what happened between you and Zareth. And because ... He paused. "Because I have a daughter. I cannot imagine anyone taking her away and hurting her like this. Can you get me into the facility?" "Impossible. The security is too tight, and you are human. You would be detected immediately." Caleron pulled out a data pad. "But there is another way." The plan was desperate and dangerous. Caleron would create a distraction by claiming to have found evidence of devourer infiltration in the medical facility. While security investigated, Jake would use stolen access codes to reach Zareth's location. "The facility has a small landing bay for medical transports," Caleron explained. "If you can reach it with Zareth, I will have a ship waiting. And then what? We'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives, perhaps. Or perhaps the child you are trying to save will change everything." Caleron looked directly at Jake. "Zareth's pregnancy has already caused debate in our government. Some of our people believe this could be the next step in evolution for both our species." 2 days later, Jake piloted a stolen medical shuttle toward Valeris Prime. His heart pounded as he approached the planet where Zareth was being held. The shuttle's false identification held up under initial scanning, and he was given permission to land. The medical facility was larger than he had expected. Finding Zareth in the maze of corridors would be nearly impossible without help. Fortunately, Caleron had provided detailed maps and security codes. Jake moved through the facility wearing stolen medical clothing. The Valerian doctors and nurses he passed paid little attention to him. Most assumed he was part of a visiting research team. He found Zareth in a secure medical ward on the facility's 10th floor. She was lying on a bed, connected to various monitoring devices. Her scales had lost their usual luster, and she looked weak. "Jake," she whispered when she saw him. "How did you get here?" "Long story. We need to leave now." Jake began disconnecting the monitoring equipment. "Can you walk?" "I think so." But Jake, the baby double quotes Zareth, touched her stomach. "Something is wrong. The pregnancy is not developing normally. Human and Valerian biology are fighting each other. We'll find help. Dr. Rodriguez is waiting for us on Haven Station. She thinks she can stabilize the pregnancy." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Jake's heart sank. They had been discovered. "This way," Zareth said, forcing herself to stand. "I know these corridors." They moved as quickly as possible toward the landing bay. Behind them, Jake could hear security forces searching the facility. Kelrin's distraction had bought them some time, but not much dot at the landing bay. They found chaos. Kelrin's false report had triggered a full security alert. Ships were launching to search for imaginary Devourer infiltrators. There, Zareth pointed to a small transport ship in the corner of the bay. Kelrin said he would mark it with blue. Lights. They ran across the landing bay as security forces closed in. Jake helped Zareth into the ship and quickly started the engines. The ship lifted off just as armed guards reached their landing pad. "Incoming ships, identify yourselves," came the demand from traffic control. "Medical emergency transport," Jake replied, using codes Kelrin had provided. "We have a pregnant patient who needs immediate transfer to advanced facilities." Negative. All ships are grounded until security sweep is complete. Jake ignored the order and pushed the ship to maximum speed. Weapons fire from the facility's defense systems lit up the space around them. One blast clipped their port engine, but they managed to escape into hyperspace. The journey to Haven Station took 6 hours. During the trip, Zareth's condition worsened. She was in pain, and the monitoring equipment Jake had brought showed dangerous fluctuations in both her vital signs, and the baby's Dr. Rodriguez was waiting when they arrived. She immediately took Zareth into surgery while Jake paced the waiting room. Hours passed with no word. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez emerged looking exhausted but hopeful. "The baby is alive, but the pregnancy is extremely complicated," she explained. "The genetic combination is causing immune system conflicts. Without intervention, both mother and child would die." "What kind of intervention?" "Experimental treatment. We need to modify both the mother's and baby's genetic markers to make them compatible. It's never been tried before." "Is it safe?" "Nothing about this pregnancy is safe, but it's their only chance." The treatment took 3 weeks. Jake stayed by Zareth's side, watching as human and Valerian medical teams worked together to save their child. Slowly, the pregnancy stabilized. "It's working," Dr. Rodriguez announced after the latest tests. "The baby is developing normally now. We estimate another 2 months until birth." When their daughter was finally born, she was beautiful beyond words. She had Zareth's golden eyes, but Jake's facial structure. Her skin showed patterns that resembled Valerian scales, but with human flexibility. "What will we call her?" Zareth asked as she held their newborn daughter. "Luna," Jake said. "Like the moon that connects Earth's day and night. She connects our 2 worlds." Luna grew up on a frontier colony where differences were accepted and questions weren't asked. She was stronger than human children, but more emotionally expressive than Valerian young. She learned both languages and cultures, becoming a bridge between 2 species. News of her existence eventually reached both governments. Instead of the anger and rejection Jake had feared, Luna became a symbol of hope. She proved that humans and Valerians could create something beautiful together. When the Devourers finally attacked in force, it was Luna who suggested the strategy that saved both species. Her unique perspective, combining human creativity with Valerian logic, found solutions that neither species could develop alone. Jake and Zareth watched their daughter grow into a leader who brought their peoples together. The woman who had once laughed at the idea of mating with a human had given birth to the future of both their species.